DW Africa Link. Will African leaders walk the talk and match their promises with action? That's the question many are asking after the recent African Union Summit. The AU Summit is the annual gathering of heads of state from all 55 member countries, the continent's highest decision-making forum. It's where Africa sets priorities, debates crises, and agrees on common positions. So what was actually decided this year? And more importantly, what challenges and solutions lie ahead? That's what's coming up. I am Eddy Micah Jnr, and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
This year's AU Summit focused on water security and sanitation, a critical issue as climate change tightens its grip on the continent. But that wasn't all. Peace and security dominated the agenda, along with renewed calls for permanent African representation on the UN Security Council. Now, these meetings matter for the continent's future. For many Africans, I know it may seem that a summit may feel distant, but its decisions shape daily life, from conflict response to development policy. So when the AU acts in unity, Africa's voice carries more weight. When it doesn't, crises linger. I'm joined by Eskinder, DW correspondent who covered the event in Addis Ababa, and Moussa Soumahoro, researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. Hello, both of you. Welcome to Africa Link. Eskinder, you were at AU headquarters throughout the summit. What stood out to you most in the discussions?
What stood out most to me was the emphasis on security issues and the urgent call for collective action to address ongoing conflicts across the continent. This emphasis was clear right from the opening remarks and continued through the press briefings by AU leaders. The chairperson of the AU Commission, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, began his speech by stating, I'm quoting here, "Our summit is taking place in a geopolitical context of crisis, both on the continent and throughout the world. As is customary, the AU designates a yearly team to guide long-term strategic development. Although summits are often dominated by pressing security concerns, this summit was no exception in that regard."
So you just quoted to us what the AU chair said. What did you get out of the whole discussion? Was there any sense of urgency from the leaders this year compared to previous years in the way they spoke, in the tone that was even used?
Sure. There were sideline meetings in addition to, the main summit. And there seemed to me, urgency especially to address the ongoing conflicts across the continent. Indeed, the leaders are also in agreement regarding the specific actions needed to tackle the conflicts across the continent. Though it was, dominated by, peace and security issues in the continent, this one was more action-oriented than the previous summits, I would say.
Okay. You sensed some sort of urgency compared to previous ones. I'm not sure if you followed the whole summit, Moussa. Do you agree with Eskinder that somehow there was a sense of urgency this time around compared to other times?
Thank you very much. Yes, I partially agree with Eskinder because my view is a bit nuanced. Looking at the trend since the Russia-Ukraine war started, African leaders have been really bold about repositioning Africa in this fragmented global order. And the peace and security issues that are internal to Africa have always been also part of the key items discussed during the AU Summit. So this year does not, in my view, really depart from other summits if I look at the recent summit like over the last 5 years. However, their commitment to a critical issue, which to me is rather a matter of survival around water issues in Africa, stands out as a key challenge they want to address.
Let me pick your thoughts on exactly that, because you're right. Leaders emphasized water security as critical economic and social infrastructure, noting severe access gaps across the continent. So what impact could or does this have on Africa's security and development agenda when it comes to shortage of water?
Water issues in Africa appear to be a really critical challenge that is, fueling several security challenges across the continent. But the fact that African leaders this time have decided to emphasize water security as one of the main challenges the continent needs to address highlights a structural paradox, which was highlighted in the 2025 Africa Water Vision report that was developed by the UNECA, the AU itself, and the African Development Bank. So from that report, one can clearly see that Africa has significant water resources, but the issue is about the geographical distribution of those resources.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're saying it was a good thing that they are addressing it, but you don't see that they went deep enough on the issue of water security?
Usually the AU themes are about awareness raising and giving momentum to a critical or particular issue. And I think they've done well in that part, but with the AU, where we really need what we decided. So what I'm seeing right now is maybe a bold commitment from head of states and a clear start of implementation from what has been decided during the summit. Otherwise, it will be the continuation of the same tokenism and without tangible results at the end. So the declaration of water security as the central theme of the year is commendable, but it will be more impactful if implementation follows.
Right. Thanks for that. I mean, that's been one of the main challenges coming out of such summits, that people say there's a lot of talk, but implementation and ways to, reach the solutions are not clear enough or strong enough, which is basically what you're highlighting. And since we're on water, I mean, for me, water is life. So if there's water security issues on the continent, that should definitely be addressed, right? What challenges do you foresee in implementing the Africa Water Vision 2026? First of all, tell us what that is, and sort of the challenges you foresee, especially for fragile or conflict-affected states.
It's important to underline that 85% of the water withdrawn from sources in Africa are from agriculture. So it will demand a lot from leaders to invest in infrastructure in order to improve irrigation system. That's why I was even talking about the water security being a survival matter, because we know that across the continent, the majority of the African people live on subsistence agriculture, which up to now lacks robust or effective irrigation systems.
With that explanation, I would want you to really make that connection between water security issues and conflicts. What do the two have in common?
Yes, so as you underline, water is life, and water in some regions of Africa, like the Sahel, is becoming scarce. And then that is fueling, as I said in the beginning, several conflicts. So it's not more about the scarcity of the resource itself, it's about how those resources are governed. So in the absence of a robust system that is able to referee how resources are shared among the people, then it becomes problematic. And in addition to that, the main challenge is not about building infrastructure in fragile contexts, but it's about maintaining them and ensuring that their sustainability, which insecurity often jeopardizes.
Thank you very much for that. So, Eskinder, I'm going to come back to you because you were there listening to it all, witnessing it all, and you were quite optimistic that this time you felt there was some sort of urgency in the tone and in the way the message was given. On the issue of water security, just a final take on that from your side. Did it seem clear what leaders wanted to do to address concerns?
Thank you for the question. Just to follow up on what Moussa said, the African Union consistently emphasizes development-oriented themes, with water security being a central focus this summit, mainly to create awareness. So it was predominantly highlighted in speeches during the opening session of the 39th African Union Summit, and also subsequent press conferences and official EU statements. Angola's President Joao Lorenzo, who concluded his term as the EU chairperson, made it clear that having access to safe drinking water and sanitation is not just a moral obligation, but also a political one. So speakers and participants have in their way tried to emphasize, the theme, and also called for action. Just to follow up on another topic that Moussa raised, as you know, water also remains a hot button issue among some African nations, highlighted by the ongoing tension between Egypt and Ethiopia, for example. So Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, representing the host country, addressed this concern by stating that rivers across Africa have the potential to become engines of stability when managed for mutual benefit. So it's safe to say that the theme water security really resonated through both official sessions and informal discussions at the summit.
These are the times that I normally say this cliche, that only time will tell if the leaders are going to walk the talk, because I think it's fascinating how we've somehow connected or linked water security issues or the management of water during periods of conflict. That I find pretty interesting. Talking about security issues, Moussa, that is basically your expertise. The Executive Council revisited conflict hotspots, especially Sudan and Eastern DRC, under the Silencing the Guns initiative. How effective do you believe AU mechanisms currently are in responding to these crises? Is it working?
The AU crisis response mechanisms have always been under the radar and central to the peace and security debate in Africa. And at the moment, there's even a general review of peace and security and governance framework that was instructed by the Assembly of Head of States and Government during the last summit. However, at the moment, the AU mechanisms remain normatively relevant, but operationally limited. Why am I saying that? Is that the Union will provide political legitimacy with its convening power and also its ability, remarkable ability to generate decisions. But when it comes to actual response to crisis on the ground, the AU is almost absent. And that is visible in Sudan and also in the Sahel. And DRC particularly was handled by a regional initiative led, first of all, by the EAC, which has some contentions with the DRC and was expelled and replaced by SADC, which led a mission known as SAMI DRC and was withdrawn for lack of funding. So that shows how limited the AU response capacity when it comes to practical terms to respond to conflict across the continent, including DRC and Sudan. So the persistent violence in Sudan and Eastern DRC reflects the limited enforcement capacity and resource constraints and insufficient operational coherence between the AU and REX as well.
Sorry not to cut you. So what needs to be done now to change things within the AU? Because you keep hearing things, people keep saying it's like a white elephant. It's such a huge institution, but it's not doing much. And then you're basically making points to that effect. What needs to happen or change within the AU to make it more effective, make it more hands-on, make it more direct in dealing with some of these challenges, especially security-related challenges?
A number of things need to be done, and the key among them are, first of all, the rebuild of the consensus that used to guide AU decision making and even response to crisis. If we look at the 2003 and 2019 period, coups, for example, drastically decreased in Africa, and that is partially owing to the robust consensus that used to exist between head of states and government, and also between the AU and REX. So there was that tendency of having a unified response to crisis when they erupted. But at this moment, and when we look at the recent coup wave, that consensus is no longer there. And there's even more competition between the AU agencies and the AU and REX. So that's the first thing that needs to be addressed. And the second one is about strengthening the AU deployment capacity. So since the African Peace and Security Architecture was established in the early 2000s, the continental body is still struggling to, operationalize the African Standby Force, which would have been the military wing of the African Peace and Security Architecture, and given more weight to the AU response to crisis. And the third one is about strengthening the AU finances, because one of the major limitations of the AU response to crisis has been the shortage of financial resources. This is noticeable with the struggles it's been having with the AU in Somalia, its crisis response to the Sahel to the Sahel issues, and also with Sudan. So just to name a few situations that the AU has struggled to address, and to that we can even add the DRC I was mentioning earlier.
Right. So you've listed some of the reasons why the AU seems to be struggling with dealing with issues. With these sort of solutions that you gave, how easy or not is it to carry them out? Because I'm just wondering what's holding the union back if it knows what to do to get better.
So thank you very much. So mentioning the issue of consensus brings us back to the issue of disciplined commitment to strengthening the union. So, for example, from the SACA Special Audit Report, the SACA is the skill audit and competency assessment that was undertaken under the AU reform to strengthen the AU workforce. So, a special audit report was initiated by member states in January 2024, which revealed an amount of 86 million US dollars arrears that member states still need to contribute to the UN, to the union. So it indicates a sort of lack of discipline in in contributing to strengthening the finances of the union. And also, when you look at the rate of head of state attendance to the AU summit, it has been decreasing over the years, diluting the nature of debates that are held during the AU summit. So it shows you that head of state commitment to strengthening the union has decreased over time, and this needs to be addressed if all the issues the union is facing now are to be improved.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Moussa. Clearly, a lot of work needs to be done. Eskinder, I'm going to come to you to what could be your final comments on this, because you've been on the ground talking to people. I'm just wondering what people make of the African Union, those that you've been speaking to, not talking about African leaders or world leaders, just the ordinary African. What's the sense you get of their trust or belief in the system of the African Union and if it's really serving the ordinary person?
So when you talk to ordinary citizens, you see and you feel that there is a sense of frustration because, they know the sufferings of, people in Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Sahel, and other parts of the continent. And while they see the African leaders convening every year, and when there is no tangible result when it comes to, bridging the gap between policy decisions and implementation, that is the sense you get, when you talk to among ordinary people. There is a sense of frustration.
Based on all that we've discussed, based on where we are with the African Union, what can we expect differently from the African Union in the next 5 to 10 years?
All right. So this will be based on different scenarios. The first one will be about an AU that is able to make a bold shift in its practices and in its ability to move away from that elitist management of continental affairs to foster a genuine connection with the African people. Because on the ground, the AU is barely known by its citizens. And it will take some time for the AU to correct that, given its requirement from the Constitutive Act and the PSA protocol to bridge the gap between the AU and African citizens. The second one, the second scenario is an AU that is, sticking to its old practices, which is, about organizing convenings, making decisions, and not being able to implement them.
Right. Thank you very much for that. And I do hope that African leaders are listening to all of this. It is good that they know what people make of literally the union or the body that is supposed to affect every life on the continent. Very much appreciated this discussion from the both of you. Eskinder Ferru, DW correspondent, who was at the event in Addis Ababa, and also Moussa Soumahoro, researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. Thank you both very much for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Get the stories that are shaping the continent here on Africa Link.
Chairperson of the AU Commission is Mahmoud Ali Yusuf from Djibouti. He's the Chief Executive Officer and legal representative responsible for the AU's daily administration. Here's what he shared after the summit.
Lack of efficiency of the African Union to resolve crises and conflicts, and the lack of initiatives that create a sense of failure. And this could have an impactful effect on the development of trade on the continent, and in particular through our common framework, which is EFCFTA. Let me say that it's not the lack of initiatives that create that sense. And I think that there are so many mechanisms that we try to use and utilize in order to bring peace and stability in some of our regions where we have conflicts and unstable situations.
Africa's geopolitical weight is growing. The continent is younger than any other, rich in critical minerals and central to the global energy transition. The AU now sits as a permanent member of the G20, a sign that Africa can no longer be treated as an afterthought in global decision-making. But rising importance brings rising pressure. Major powers are competing for access to Africa's minerals, markets, and strategic partnerships. If the AU speaks with one clear voice, it strengthens Africa's bargaining power on the world stage. What do you think? Share your thoughts with us on Facebook at DW Africa. Listen on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. This show was co-produced and edited by Isaac Kaleji. And I am Eddy Micah Jnr. Thanks for listening.
DW, made for minds.